Welcome back to Inside the System. I'm Jasmine Logan, and I'm joined by Emeritus Political Science Professor Dr. David Canervo. Today we'll be covering news in American politics relating to Georgia's international students getting a restraining order, farmers in Nevada struggling after cuts to a federal program, and public records being changed or taken down on government websites. So stay tuned. International students in Georgia can continue to go to school and work without fear of being deported. A federal judge in Atlanta is expected to grant a temporary restraining order after dozens of visas were revoked. Audrey Washington has the details.
None of these students did anything that would make them removable from the United States.
A bold statement Thursday after both immigration attorneys and government attorneys went head-to-head inside federal court. At issue, a newly filed lawsuit accusing ICE of illegally revoking the immigration status of dozens of international students without due process.
Everyone, no matter what their immigration status is entitled to the protections of the U.S. Constitution.
The suit alleges ICE used the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System to terminate the student immigration records.
We know ICE has an AI, and they said, AI, here's all the students. Check it against every database.
Inside court, the attorney for the government requested a list of student names and information to determine the status and legality of their student visas. Attorney Charles Cuck, who represents the students, agreed to provide additional documents. The judge is now expected to grant the requested temporary restraining order on Friday.
It says, okay, you're okay. Can't be deported, you can't be put in removal proceedings, you can go back to work.
This is going to create tremendous psychological stress.
Tara Doyle is a retired professor at Emory University. She says she's concerned about the students.
Oh, they're terrified. Our students are so scared. I mean, they're already nervous.
ICE has not yet responded to a request for a comment. Additionally, a preliminary injunction hearing is scheduled for this Thursday. Dr. Canervo, what does this temporary restraining order against ICE signal about the relationship between our current government and immigration policies?
Well, the immigration policies in this country have been under attack because they really haven't been working very well for quite a while. This administration came into office saying that they were going to be tough on immigration, that they were going to, in fact, deport lots and lots of immigrants into this country, supposedly primarily those who were here illegally, but certainly those students who were in Georgia colleges, but in colleges around the country, are here illegally on what are called student visas. So for the administration to try to get ICE to deport these students for apparently offenses, some of which they were not ever convicted for, trying to get them deported says that the current administration is trying to go much further and much harder in its actions against the immigrant students than has certainly happened before. So it's putting ICE in a situation where they have to respond, of course, to the chief executive, or at least the chief executive expects that, certainly. And the new head of ICE expects that because he is on the forefront of trying to get immigrants out of this country. On the other hand, I think there are a lot of representatives in Congress who I would hope are concerned about their universities in their state and would want to allow students to finish out the school year, encourage students to come to the United States and enroll in our universities, and that there could be some pushback, number one, not only from Congress eventually, not right away, I don't expect, but certainly from the courts to try to make sure that the law as it currently reads is being followed.
Of course, and that's what, the Georgia judge is pushing back against, the revocation of these student visas without due process. I mean, constitutionally, that's just not what America stands for. So, do you think this situation in Georgia and how they're choosing to handle how ICE is going about these deportations, how much influence could that have on nationwide politics and how other states might respond?
Well, certainly I would think that there are people who are sympathetic to the students who, see this as a situation where perhaps the administration is overstepping at least a little bit, if not a lot, and that it could affect politics negatively with the upcoming elections next year, the midterm elections in 2026, as people kind of resent what is happening, particularly if in fact the students are not given due process, or if they are sought to be thrown out of the United States for really reasons that are not particularly germane to why they're here. So I think all of those things play a role and potentially could have a negative effect on Republicans next year in the elections if in fact this isn't straightened out more clearly.
I agree, because you're right. Our current administration has made it clear that they are after criminals who have come into this country without the proper steps and without gaining legal citizenship, and they're focused on getting migrants who have committed crimes out of this country, which is one thing, but these students that are here with legal status that, as far as we know, have committed no crimes, why are they being targeted? That doesn't seem like what we were told was the goal when it comes to immigration.
Yeah. Well, and the worst thing that I've read that students have been involved in these cases was DUI. One student was stopped for a suspected DUI case. She did plead guilty and she did get a year suspended sentence. But nevertheless, under the law, that is not an offense which would normally lead to expulsion from the country and revocation of the visa. Other situations where, as you say, where there's no evidence of a crime, where there was never anything more than perhaps a discussion between a police officer and a student. Maybe a ticket was handed out for something pretty minor, but other than that, there was nothing really worthy, it seems to me, of something so severe as revocation of a student visa. After all, the student has paid a great deal of money to go to the school. The student close to graduation or close to ending the school year certainly would like to be able to finish the school year, and the revocation of the visa would of course prevent that from happening.
Of course, and as a student myself who's put in a lot of time and dedication to getting this degree, I mean, I would hate to be in that situation, right? And so, this leads to our next topic. You kind of brought up universities a moment ago. I mean, how do you think this visa instability is going to affect international students and American institutions?
Well, I think one of the implications of it certainly is it's going to discourage some foreign students from coming here. They might instead go to a European university. They might stay home, but they might not come here. And that's a real problem for American schools, because a lot of them certainly encourage and depend upon international students coming here to help fill out their quota of students.
Definitely, and so we'll have to see how this develops and how it could affect international students here in the U.S. But we'll be right back after this short break to discuss Nevada farmers impacted by federal cuts.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzz and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
When farmers hurt, consumers hurt. That's what a farmer in Nevada is saying after a federal program aimed at helping farmers there ended. He says the cuts by the U.S. Department of Agriculture is forcing him to find alternative ways to make a profit. Ways he says will put a dent in consumers' pockets. Taylor Burke explains.
I don't like to see people going hungry.
In Silver Springs, Nevada, Ray Johnson walks through his 2.5-acre farm, Custom Gardens. For over 30 years, he has cultivated a diverse array of produce from apples to turmeric with the help of volunteers and his loyal dog, Toki.
We have peaches, apples, and nectarines. Big peach like that. And then, of course, the cherry tree that we fight with the birds over.
But this season, the farm is only half planted. The reason? The end of the Home Feeds Nevada program.
We're stocked up pretty much on seed, but I'm afraid to plant it because we just don't have the place to sell it or the people have the money to buy it.
Since the program's inception, Johnson had provided 2,500 pounds of fresh produce to the Food Bank of Northern Nevada. Without it, he's forced to seek alternative routes, such as farmers markets, which come with additional costs and logistical challenges. With that cutting into his profits, Johnson is forced to pass the cost on to the consumer.
Paying $4 for a bunch of carrots just makes me cringe. That is just ridiculous. But that's what you have to do in order to break even.
Johnson wants people to realize that farmers live in the community and need to be able to look their neighbors in the face and explain why they charge what they do. This makes him worry about the broader implications of these changes.
People who receive the WIC coupons and could purchase fresh fruits and vegetables, they will not be able to do so. That'll hurt.
The Food Bank of Northern Nevada, which serves 160,000 families each month, is also feeling the strain.
We received about 3 million pounds of food.
Jocelyn Landtrip, the director of marketing, expressed concern over the program's termination.
It's not an option for us to fail, so we have to look for other ways to fill that pipeline, and that's exactly what we'll do, but it is definitely noticed.
Farmers are calling for sustainable ways to support local agriculture as the growing season begins. Dr. Canervo, can you explain what this federal program was and why it could have been cut by the USDA?
Well, what the program did was to provide federal funds, grants to food surplus areas, food shelters where people could come and receive food for free. And this was a way of helping poor people. Certainly, we know that food prices have increased over the last 2 or 3 years a great deal. And more people are feeling food insecure, that they don't have the amount of and kinds of food they really need to have for their families. And so these food locations would be available for people to simply go and, for free, pick up food for them to take home to feed their families. The federal government would give these places money to buy from local farmers. Most of these farmers were family farms that are smaller than the large agribusinesses that exist. And so it was a way of helping not only poor people, but also helping the smaller family farms be able to sell their products.
That makes sense. Why do you think it could have been cut by the USDA?
Well, I think it was part of the DOGE program. They saw it as a way of providing efficiency. I think they believe, rightly or wrongly, that these kinds of programs might better be served at the state and local level rather than a federal budgetary item that the federal government has to pay for. Nevada farmers, perhaps, they reason could be better served by the Nevada state government providing this kind of grant to the food shelters as well. So that would be my guess.
I get what you mean, but do you believe that local and state governments will be able to fill in the gaps for the lack of agricultural funding on a federal level?
I think it's going to be hard for the state and local governments to pick these kind of program up, at least immediately. They have to budget for it, obviously. State and local governments must maintain balanced budgets, unlike the federal government, which can go into a deficit. And so for the federal government to immediately say, well, this is something we're going to stop, you all pick it up and take care of it, is not something which is just going to happen overnight. And so the result is that the food handout places are closing, and the farmers are now very frightened because they have lost an important market for their product. And so it's a lose-lose situation. Poor people can't get the food that they want and need, and the farmers don't have a market for the product that they've spent a lot of money and time growing. And so it really is a severe loss for the farmers, particularly the smaller family farmers, which are running on very thin margins and are much less stable than some of the larger agribusinesses. And of course, for the farmers and the consumers, on top of all this are the tariffs, which have led to American farm products being shut out of previous markets. China, for example, has stopped accepting soybeans and grain and corn from the United States, which is a major market for American farmers. Without that market, what are they going to do with their product?
Of course, so this is just another hit for the farming and agricultural industry. And like our Nevada farmer said, when farmers are hurting, consumers are hurting. And that's the last thing we need with prices already increasing. But if federal support for agriculture in the U.S. continues to shrink, how do you think this could affect the American food system overall?
Well, it's going to be an additional problem. On the one hand, as food supplies are reduced, it means food prices will continue to go up. Farmers are going to have to grow less because they can't afford the seed and the fertilizer. Fertilizer, for example, has gone up tremendously in price because of the tariffs on potash from foreign countries. And so there's a real continuing decline, it seems to me, for both the poor person, the consumer, and the farmer, and it's going to be just getting worse.
That's very unfortunate, and we'll have to see how farmers are able to respond to this now lack of federal funding. But we'll be right back after this short break to discuss public military records being changed on government sites. So stay tuned.
My Shiro doesn't always wear a cape, but she always has time for a hug, a smile, for going the extra mile. My Shiro stretches every dollar, puts in long hours, puts others first. But now it's your time, Mom. When you're ready to retire, we want you to be able to enjoy it. It's time to start saving now. A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today. Visit aceyourretirement.org/Shiro.
Thanks for sticking around. To close out our segment today, we'll be talking about a recent trend with government websites. A Colorado woman has the distinction of being the first woman to fly with the Air Force Thunderbirds. However, her story has since been taken down from government websites. As Mark Salinger reports, she says the removal was because it was considered diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI.
Yes, sure. I flew F-15E Strike Eagles in 3 operational fighter squadrons. I had the privilege of commanding a fighter squadron, and I also served as a pilot with the United States Air Force Thunderbirds and was, in fact, the first woman to do so.
Nicole is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel. She served our country for 21 years. Plenty of articles have been written about her and published to military websites.
When you click on that link, it'll literally say 404, page not found.
Now some of those articles have been removed. The military says the topics are considered diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI.
And it's been really just shocking to me to see that we would censor the historical fact, the historical stories, the historical contributions of service members and veterans.
Stories about Nicole with headlines like, "A Life in Flight for First Woman Thunderbirds Pilot" used to be on military websites. Now they've been taken down. An Air Force public affairs team called me today to say they were removed in compliance with President Trump's directives to remove DE&I content.
There was indeed a time when women and minorities could not serve in our military. There was indeed a time when women and minorities could not, fly aircraft in defense of their country. And so for us to act like those barriers never happened or those barriers were never broken is to completely ignore our history.
Nicole says other female aviators have experienced the same thing.
I can't believe something like this is happening in the country whose uniform I wore.
Now she's questioning why her accomplishments can no longer be celebrated by the military she served.
For us to turn around and say you're good enough to serve but not good enough to be remembered is a complete slap in the face.
It has been well reported around the country that the Trump administration has worked to remove content they consider DEI from government websites. The Air Force Public Affairs team says that the reason these articles about Nicole Malachowski were purged, they say they're following the president's directive. Dr. Canervo, how significant is it when government agencies remove historical content for its perceived connection with DEI?
Well, I think it's ridiculous, actually. It seems to me that history is history, that we must maintain it. We need to look at all aspects of history, all parts of it, regardless of what the history was and what it says. It's all important, and it says something about our past, and we need to remember it and honor it when it requires and merits honor, and be sad about it when it's something for which we should be sorry. And so it seems to me that for them to remove a photograph of a woman who has accomplished something is very unfortunate. There seems to be the assumption here that DEI is pushing people and rewarding people regardless of merit, and assumes that these people don't have merit, that they don't have skills, that they don't have talent, but rather they were just given these positions because of what they look like or what gender they were. And that's not the fact at all. I mean, obviously this woman had the skill and talent to fly an airplane, a fighter jet, and do it well. And the same is true for other people who may be honored. I doubt that John Glenn was DEI. I mean, he was the first one to orbit the Earth from the American side, and yet I'm sure his picture was up and celebrated. Do we say that as a white male, he got it simply because he was a white male? Well, maybe he did, because that's who was in the astronaut program at that time. And that's an unfortunate part of our history too. And so it just seems crazy to honor only white males, when in fact they were the only ones who in many cases were given a chance to begin with, whereas somehow honoring Hispanics, African Americans, women, Asians, whoever else, these people were given something that they didn't deserve. And that's just not an appropriate way to look at it at all.
I totally get what you mean. You're right. This woman, Nicole, this is something that she worked hard for and that she accomplished. And if she was a man, I don't think they would label it DEI and take it down like you mentioned. I'm confused why, because of her gender, they're removing her content. And I understand, this current administration has taken a hard stance against diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you're right. There seems to be this assumption that those people are undeserving or they didn't work as hard, but we know that's not the case. And so to undermine her achievement in that way, I think is disrespectful, honestly. And, I do wonder, is there any similar moments in U.S. history where administrations have reshaped or even erased parts of public records like this?
Well, certainly among some of the new curriculum in our public schools, there's an attempt to eliminate stories of slavery in this country. Well, that's the major thing, but also the Jim Crow laws that followed the end of the Civil War. So, and the discrimination, the very serious discrimination that existed, the white riots that occurred in, where was it, Tulsa, I think?
Alabama, yes.
Alabama, yeah. And so all of those things which are unfortunate and sad parts of our history are in some cases being eliminated under the guise of not wanting today's kids to feel bad about the country. Well, the fact is our country has not been perfect in its 250 years. Whether it's taking land from Mexico, or whether it's taking over the Philippines and Guam and some of those other islands through military action, the threat to take Greenland militarily is not a particularly mature and good thing to talk about. But we're talking about it, or at least the president's talking about it now. And to hide these problems in our history is just simply not a good thing. We learn from that. We learn from our mistakes. We learn from things that we should not have done and how they turned out. And to ignore it, I think, is just not appropriate at all.
I agree. You're totally right. Ignoring our country's important history, the good and the bad, it doesn't change what happened. And in fact, I think that could stifle the moves that we're making now, right? History is so important because it helps to give us a good picture of where we came from and where we want to go next. And I just hope that, these moves, when it comes to taking this historical content off government websites, doesn't affect our country's idea and knowledge about our true history.
Sure.
Well, guys, unfortunately, that is all we have for you today. Thanks for tuning in for another season of Inside the System. Although this is the last episode of this season, don't worry, because we will be back again next fall. Good luck with finals, everybody. See you next time.